Hi there, my name is Janet Gershensiegel and I'm the Lonely Writer. This is serious social media help for the independent author. Today I'm going to be starting a new section on prompts, and this is all to dovetail with NaNoWriMo because sometimes people get a little flustered and they might not necessarily have inspiration. So the idea here is to kind of push you in certain directions. These prompts are not intended to just be a story unto themselves. You're going to have to add to them, and if you just strung them all together, it probably wouldn't look very coherent. So the concept here is to add some prompting for people, and you can sort of pick and choose out of these. You don't have to do them all. Anyway, the first prompt is this one word: fresh. Now, part of that is because this is the first day of Nano. So let's talk a little bit about freshness. What is it all about? So what do we mean when we're talking about something that's fresh? Part of this is a connotation of newness. We can absolutely use the word fresh as a synonym for the word new, although it's not quite the same. Very often this has a concept of things that are edible, because we might see the word fresh as being the antonym of the word stale. But it can also be about being in time. So if something is fresh, it's that it's new, that it's just happened. It's a new thing on the scene. So one question is freshness relevant? Relative, rather. So my question being, do we measure it in some sort of an objective fashion, or do we use it as a comparison to other things, most likely older things? So when we look at an apple and we say that it's completely red and it feels like it's firm and everything, we might say that it's ripe or that it's fresh. If we set out a new meal, something that we just cooked, not even necessarily something that's vegetative, we might say, well, that's fresh. That your beef, your beef stew is fresh. It's freshly made. It's new. It was just put out here. It hasn't been sitting here for a while. And in the case of stew, it's also that it's still hot. But there's also some objective measurements of freshness. Part of them have to do with age, but they might also have to do with, you might be looking at the nutritional content of foods. But there is, like I said, there's a relative aspect to it, where we look at two apples, one of which is completely red and the other one which is only half red, and we say that this one is riper, and maybe ripe isn't exactly a synonym of fresh, but often the connotations do work together. And now, how do we look at it in a different fashion? I find personally that creativity tends to be spurred when I try to look at something from another way. So what do we mean when we say a person is fresh? Part of that is a connotation of newness. That's actually, there's a song, Fresh. It's like a disco song. And it's not a negative connotation at all. It's a rather positive one, where it's talking about a woman who's sort of fresh on the scene, somebody new in town. But when I was growing up in particular, fresh, when you said somebody was fresh, it almost always kind of accompanied a slap. I mean, this was the connotation was of somebody trying to take sexual liberties, whether it was that they were, trying to put their hand on your knee or whatever. But and these days it might be somebody trying to take an upskirt photo. But fresh also has the connotation of fresh memories. So those are newly experienced, but it's also beyond the association of newness. It could also be a rather strong association with trauma. So that the word fresh, which starts off, we think, is a very positive word, when it comes to trauma, when we're talking about the memory of her attack was still fresh in her mind. So it's got an extraordinarily negative connotation. But none of this matters except in the context of, what does fresh mean to you? So that's my prompt to you for the day. Welcome to NaNoWriMo. And I'm the Lonely Writer, because an independent writer never has to be alone. Thanks so much for listening.